There is the voice waiting for Facebook to beam in. And I see it preparing. And there we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to History Matters and So Does Coffee, which I'm not going to completely show my coffee mug because well, you'll see why when I show my coffee mug. At any rate, welcome. Today we are going to talk about why protest matters. There are obvious reasons I'm doing this today, but I will explain more when I launch off into what I want to say. But before I do that, I turn to my amazing partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History, another edition of New American History on the Road. I'm in Nebraska this weekend. So here's how this works. We're delighted to see all of our friends in the community in the chat. Those of you who are with us every week, those of you who are new to the group. If you are new to the group, please introduce yourself. But as Joanne is talking, and I know you'll have lots of great questions, those go down below in the Q&A so they're easier for us to find them. I'll be back in about 30 minutes and we'll take some of your questions.
Okay. As I sort of suggested, and I should point out, this is the episode 287. We finally figured out we could put it on the screen rather than having me forget it every week. So it's our 287th episode. And along those lines, if you are new, if you are just newcomer, as someone said earlier, as Gay said earlier, a newbie, which caught my eye, or if this is the first time you've been able to join us live, please tell folks in chat because you will be given a robust welcome because this is indeed a community, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about community and why that matters in my comments today. Fixing my screen a little. There we go. Okay. So what I want to talk about today is partly inspired by the fact that tomorrow is, King's Day. It's going to be a day of protest. But what inspired me to want to talk about this, in addition to the simple timeliness of it, is I'm seeing increasing, not a sea of comments, but enough that it caught my eye of people basically saying, and people on the left basically saying it doesn't matter. Like, oh, great, it's a parade. So what? Like you performative, you know, liberals, wannabe liberals who are just, getting together on a Saturday and marching in the streets. It's a parade. It's not accomplishing anything. There's no action being taken. It doesn't matter. And I understand why there's even anger behind some of those statements because people want action, people want change, and I understand that. I really understand that. But what I want to talk about here and address, like in a very directed manner, is why it does matter. Why a protest like what's going to go on tomorrow, why it really does matter. Clearly, Rosie agrees that it matters. At any rate, it does for a number of reasons. And I will agree with those who are saying in a variety of different venues, like, what's it going to do? It can't be the only thing. It's like, well, no one's saying that marching on a weekend is the only thing that needs to happen to invoke change, right? No one, or I hope no one is saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that marching is all we need, but I am saying, and I will say today, and I will explain how and why, it matters a lot that these kinds of demonstrations, and that word is important to think about, a demonstration, they matter. Yes, will it change the minds of people in power? Who knows? Maybe they'll pretend like it's a parade, although the people in power right now are saying all kinds of wacky things about what's going to happen on Saturday, to a degree that they've now, spotlighted the event because they're expressing such fear, um, amazing fear about, I don't know, all of the things that have been thrown. It's Hamas, they're funded by Soros, they're whatever, the whole string of nonsense being thrown at what's going to go on. And I will just put out there, I'm not going to talk about that explicitly this morning, but just consider to yourself, if you're saying that these demonstrations don't mean anything, think about why we're getting this sort of cloud of nonsensical discouragement. that would suggest it does mean something. But at any rate, I'll come back to that. So why does it matter? Why do we need to have these kinds of protests? What do they actually accomplish, given that it's not a general strike, or it's not boycotting, or it's not whatever it is that people want to see, and that we need action? I get it. However, a couple of things. Number one, why does this kind of protest matter? Because, and some of these points are not going to be shockingly new, but I think they need to be said because I think people aren't thinking about them. They fuel the energy of resistance. They're fuel. They're fuel for people to focus on what's happening because we can all, it's not, how do I want to put this? It is easier than it should be for us to go on with our lives and go to work and come home and think to ourselves, oh, I hate what's happening, and then go to work and come home, right? And that does not fuel any energy of resistance. It's a long-standing thing that people say is that it's not like there's, bang, authoritarianism comes in, with a clank of chains and ooh, I am. It's a slow slide, and you go about your normal everyday life, and suddenly you start realizing things are changing in a pretty fundamental way. So what one thing that a declared day like tomorrow does is fuel the energy of resistance. When you see big numbers of people in the streets, when you are among the big numbers of people in the streets, it's empowering, right? You see a lot of people in the street, and I'm going to come back to this point, it's my second point in a moment, but when you see mass numbers of people in the street, or even if you don't see it, because you can't rely on press coverage, if you know, and in part, if you know, because in your locality, wherever you are, you can see people in the street. If you know there are mass numbers of people in the street, and not even just in the United States, protesting, it's empowering. It shows you that you're not alone in your house or apartment, doom scrolling and thinking, are things as bad as I think they are? Yeah, they probably are at this point, but there are millions of people who agree and want something done. The parade, the protest is not the thing that will induce change in and of itself, but it fuels the will and the desire and the consciousness that that kind of pushback is possible. Without it, we're all isolated. With it, it forms a sort of, I have this point later in my notes, but I'm going to make it now, a community of resistance. When you know millions of people are marching, if you're among them or if you're not, that shows you that there is a community of resistance and that you are part of that community. Or if you're not part, perhaps that protest, and here's another reason why these kinds of protests are important, perhaps that protest is going to move you as a fence sitter into being someone who actually says, you know what, I've been upset about this all along, but I wasn't sure how upset I should be. And wow, there's a lot of other people who are upset. So maybe I should really think about what I'm seeing and what I think about it. So, point number one, why do these things matter? They fuel the energy of resistance. Point number two, why does protest matter? Because it shows everyone in government and outside of government that there are mass numbers of people who do not like what's going on. That's a big statement. That matters a lot. And of course, anyone in any way who has ever marched in a mass protest understands in a kind of visceral way the empowerment of that and the sort of way in which you feel differently about yourself and your engagement and your involvement and where you are and the cause, all of these things happen when you're in a crowd of people marching. But even if you're not in the crowd, seeing that kind of thing means something, right? Millions of people do not like what's happening. Buried in that concept is the idea of hope. If millions and millions of people do not like what's going on, it means that if we get our act together in some way, and the parade is the start, it's not the finish line. If we get our act together in some way, there is the possibility of change. There is hope in the fact that mass numbers of people are willing to get up, get off their couch, get out into the street and march with fervor and apparently this weekend with creativity because I think we're going to see a lot of costumes. Come back to that shortly. At any rate, so fuel energy of resistance, show everyone in government and otherwise mass numbers of people who don't like what's going on. Um, Part of why that's important is, and I've talked about this many times before, people making authoritarian power grabs rely on fear for power, right? That's where their power comes from, is to make people scared. They don't necessarily even have to follow through on their threats. They just have to make believable threats for people to decide to sit down and shut up. And I talked about this a lot before, right? But that's the internal dynamic in my most recent book about Congress leading up to the Civil War. The Southerners defending slavery made it clear that they were willing to fight, duel, push, knife, whatever else, people in Congress who were going to stand up and oppose slavery. And people believed those threats. And it encouraged many people who otherwise might have stood up and protested against slavery to sit down and shut up. So that part of what is happening and part of what we're watching right now, if the parade is a form of performance, so is a lot of what we're happening right now. And that doesn't mean it's not dangerous, and that doesn't mean it's not horrific, and that doesn't mean that lives aren't being damaged. But what it does mean is a lot of what we're seeing right now is being done so that we'll see it. It's the appearance of it, which is why it becomes important for the people who are engaging ICE and others in what's going on now. Like they feel the need to be particularly vicious, particularly, chest beating, we're strong, look at us, we can do whatever we want. That performance is part of what's important right now. A mass protest is just a different kind of performance and an important one, which gets to the question. So if you're making a mass protest, you're poking at the fear that authoritarians rely on for power. You're saying, yeah, I know, whatever, but I'm exercising my right to protest. I'm going to come back to that in a moment too. I'm here. I'm standing up. I know you want me to be scared. I'm just marching. Look at me. I'm marching, maybe in a costume, maybe holding a sign, maybe just marching, but I'm doing that. So I'm not hiding because of what you're saying. You're not scaring me to the degree that you need to scare me. You're not. So you're pushing back. Just showing up is pushing back. Number two, being in a costume, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be in a costume, which by any means, but what we've been seeing, particularly in Portland with the inflatable frog costume, and this is proven, and I encourage you as ever, go Google around, look up laughtivism, look up Serbia and activism. Again and again and again, you see authoritarian regimes that are weakened and eventually overturned in part by people who can make fun of them and mock them in a way that gets everybody laughing at them. And then there that pokes the bubble of fear that I just saw a frog emoji go up on the side of the screen. I'm sorry. And now I'm going to see a million. But at any rate, those costumes, dancing costumes in the street of Portland, that in the face of these sort of black uniformed people standing with guns, that in and of itself is saying, yeah, okay, I know you're trying to make us really be scared, but we're poking a little hole in that. We're showing you for what you are, your performance, because we're here dancing around, showing you, mocking you, punching a hole in the fear that you're trying to spread, punching a hole in your performance, right? It's like if you were watching a performance at a theater, uh, you know, actors acting kind of performance. And the crowd suddenly begins to boo. Now, even if you're enjoying the show, that's the end of that performance, right? Because it's told you this is a show, people don't like the show. I tend to get caught up in theater and I get swept into the show. That's going to cut that right off, right? It just stops a performance in its tracks. So protest punches holes in the power grab of authoritarianism by punching holes in the idea that it's all fear, right? No. And actually, if you can mock it and you can laugh at it, again, not saying it's not serious, but if you can do that, you're showing it up for what it is. Um, And as I said before, a third reason why this kind of protest is important is because it shows people, whether they're taking part or whether they're not, that they are not alone in whatever feelings they're having of displeasure, distrust, dislike, outrage at what's going on. There is as I said before, a community of resistance out in the street, coming together by the millions, however many millions there are, there will be millions. That is a community of resistance. And if you see that happen and you think, okay, well, I didn't go march, but I actually agree with that, and that actually makes me feel some form of hope, you are part of that community of resistance. I've talked about community a billion zillion times in the 287. That's really good to have that number there. Episodes that we've had, because it's so easy to feel powerless and isolated in times of trouble, times of crisis. And people in power often want you to feel powerless and isolated. One of the things that mass protest does, if you're unhappy, outraged at what's going on, is show you that you're not alone in your feelings. And again, that's power. That has a power. It has a power potentially to pull in fence sitters. It has a power maybe to encourage people to do more than march, but actually to take action. The point of these protests aren't to make instant political change. They set the stage for change. They show that change is possible. They show that millions of people want what's going on now to change. They set the stage for action. And in that sense, they're vitally important. As I said, that kind of protest alone isn't enough, but without it, how do you show people that there's a will to push back? How do you motivate people who are not necessarily already motivated, motivate them to think about what's going on and maybe to take action? How do you give people the strength of a sense of community to push back? In essence, how do you build a movement without public mass protests? Fueling energy, getting people to see that there are a lot of people who want to make change. You can't build a movement planning privately to take action. You need a public face. You need people to set the stage of hope and change. And that's what these kinds of protests accomplish. How do you build a movement? We're setting the stage for a movement. History shows us examples about the suffragists, about how we all have an image in our head about what they looked like in their white with the sashes protesting, because that created an image of women protesting. It created something that people didn't necessarily at the time know was there in numbers like that. So the suffragists used this kind of public display of setting the stage. Obviously, civil rights advocates did this to a massive degree with great impact. They showed that there were people not just willing to push back, but pushing back. Again, how do you have hope for change without seeing people standing up and saying, I am standing here desiring change? Abolitionists made use of this. Um, Actually, the wide awakes were part of what I wanted to point out, because they're not a social change movement per se. But the wide awakes, and this is, I think, an interesting point. I'm talking about people standing up, having parades for purposes of protest. But political parties essentially do the same thing when they have campaign rallies, when they get thousands of people together and then they brag about the numbers of people who were there. Campaign rallies, political rallies, particularly centered around an election, they're doing the exact same thing that I'm saying a protest can do. They're getting a big crowd together and in part saying, look at the big crowd. There are a lot of people with us. Go vote. It's the same impulse. Get a crowd of people together and make it an issue focused crowd, a crowd that's centered on wanting a particular candidate, a crowd that's centered on wanting a particular kind of change. That kind of momentum is what these kinds of moments capture. So the Wide Awakes are a group that went out in the streets and marched for political purpose. And bound up with that, I suppose you could say, is a lot of social purpose, because they were marching on behalf of Abraham Lincoln running for president and the Republican Party at that time. But what the Wide Awakes were was a Republican political organization dedicated to electing Abraham Lincoln as president. And there were a number of things that made them distinctive. Number one was it was actually mostly young men. So it was a young organization. Come back to that point right away. They had uniforms. They were marching in a way that showed that they were together, marching in the streets, sometimes bearing torches. And they showed that there were a lot of people, young people, interested in what was going on. They got other young people interested because other young people said, "Wow, what's that?" You know, like, and if you go online and again Google around Wide Awakes, you could see some of the strengths of this movement were that they young people could travel to different places and there'd be a wide awake group there that they could join in with. So it's political, but again, setting a stage and inviting other people onto the stage with you. Um, in 1856, actually in 1860, I'm sorry, I take it back. In 1860, when this is all happening, the person who ultimately would become Lincoln's Secretary of State, William Seward, said, quote, "The reason we didn't get an honest president in 1856, as opposed to 1860, was because the old men of the last generation were not wide awake. And the young men of this generation hadn't got their eyes open. Now, the old men are folding their arms and going to sleep, and the young men throughout the land are wide awake." Those parades were waking young people up to what was happening. Again, setting the stage for change. So I don't want to go too far over, but I want to conclude my opening comments here with a couple really important points looking ahead to tomorrow. Do not forget that protesting is your constitutional right. And if you're afraid to exercise that right, consider what that means. Ask yourself if you still have that right, if you're afraid to exercise it, and think about the implications of that, because that's right where we are. That's where we are. So think about what that means. There's a reason why the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, why there are three things that are put together in that amendment. I'm going to read it in a moment. Free speech, the right of petition, and the right of assembly, which is in essence the right to protest. Those are all together in the First Amendment because they are all ways of enforcing accountability on government. They are tools of accountability. Let me read the First Amendment, and then I'm going to come back to that point. So this is the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay? All of those things, free speech, the right of petition, the right of assembly, the right of protest, those are all about, they're tools to make the government accountable to the people. They're about the fundamental dynamic of a democratic Republican government, right? The people are the ones who ultimately govern. Public opinion governs. And how do they exercise that power above and beyond voting? Well, in all of the ways I just suggested. And marching, assembling, showing protest is one of the ways in which you are trying to at least begin a process of holding government accountable. It's your right as an American citizen. And not only that, it's your duty as an American citizen to hold government accountable to us. They are accountable to us. There's a reason why they're called public servants. The government is ours. The country is ours. It's easy to forget that. It's so easy to forget that. So we need to preserve these rights, free speech, right of assembly, the right of petition. We need to preserve these rights because they hold the key to the fundamental accountability of the government to the American people. And when a government no longer feels accountable in any way to the people, democracy dies. Tomorrow's protest is a demonstration of it's a demand for accountability. It will not accomplish that in and of itself. But the fact that it's happening shows that everyone isn't cowed into silence, sitting at home and wondering what happens next. They are together. They are willing to literally stand up and join each other in the streets. They want government to be accountable to them, the power of the people. That's what demonstrations, that's what protests, that's what these kinds of mass marches do. So I give all of that to the people who I've been seeing online and other places saying, it doesn't matter. We need to do mass action. You try to have mass action without getting people motivated and bringing them together as a community of resistance. That is my response. And maybe there'll even be a way to pull together some of what I just talked about, and putting it out there online so that the people will stop saying it doesn't matter for all of the reasons I just named. It matters more than I actually can say. Okay, I will now stop. And for those of you who are here and are new, um, the mug that I could not hold up, you'll see why I could not hold it up. Because it has an image of the original American protesters, right? And I think this is from Dale. I think this is.
I think you're right.
I think Dale gave me this from Williamsburg. I think Dale. I have to open chat to see, but I think Dale, and I've used it before. So every week I have some mug that has something to do with what I'm talking about. I know it's Benjamin Bunny was the origin of this, but the original protesters, and they weren't bunnies. But anyway, there was no way I could mask this behind my little,
Right, right.
but at any rate, so take heart is part of what I'm showing here. Okay, I will stop talking.
All
Uh,
right. So I'm hoping Claire can splice the two together. I just started recording on my own because she texted and said she wasn't feeling well, and then she just cut out. So I hope
oh
she's okay.
no.
I took
Okay.
her to the doctor, so I hope that's what she did. So
Okay.
we're gonna carry on, and I'm gonna check in on her like Annie does at the end. So
Okay.
I'll let y'all know in Slack.
And if she's there and can just say, I'm okay, that would be good.
I think I think she said she was logging off, so I'm hoping she
Okay.
went to the doctor.
Okay.
All right. So our friend Miranda, our good friend Miranda, from Springfield, Illinois, says there are murmurs of Trump using the No Kings protest as a reason to activate the Insurrection Act on Saturday. Should we still go out to protest knowing he may use that for nefarious reasons?
Yeah. I mean, yes. The short answer is yes. I think that's important to note because I think it's important that what happens tomorrow is a peaceful walk. That's it. That's all we need to do is walk and yell if you want to. That's it. You don't have to wear yellow. You don't have to have a sign. You don't have to do anything other than walk. Might there be a desire to make trouble in some way to thus somehow justify more force on the part of the government? I don't know. If they're doing that, it's sure as heck not going to happen everywhere all at once, all at the same time, number one. But number two, again, if we aren't out there doing what we're doing, that kind of suggestion will just be absolutely possible. There'll be no resistance to it.
Yeah.
So I think, again, what's happening tomorrow should be peaceful. We should just be marching together. There might be people who are going to try to make trouble. I have no idea. If there are, just steer away. Just don't engage with people who are trying to make trouble. If you've taken part in mass protests before, for the most part, it's marching down a street with a lot of people yelling and feeling togetherness. That's for the most part what a protest is. The threats about wanting the Insurrection Act, the threats about whatever was coming out on the part of the administration, they are trying to scare people away from taking part. Just like all of the weird, they're all Hamas. No, they're Marxists. No, they're being paid for by Soros. No, they're, whatever. Um, I would say, what all of that shows is fear on the one hand. So if you're grabbing power on the basis of image, an image of power, boy, you're not really happy about millions of people standing up and saying, yep, here we are. We know. Claim all the power you have, but we're standing here by the millions. So yeah, I do on there, there are tips for peaceful protesting put in chat. Yeah, just yes, I do think the answer to that is we should go. I think march peacefully and you know you will march, you will end the march, you will go home and you will know that you did your part and stood up for a fueling moment for the possibility of change. So yes, I do think that we should. And I again, as I suggested earlier, and I think Heather said something similar, someone said that to me at some point. If you're too scared to go, and that's fine. If you don't want to go, don't go. If you're too scared, okay. Just think about what that means. If you're too scared to go protest for your rights by just marching, that to me is more terrifying than the march, right? Like if you really feel that you don't fundamentally have the ability to stand up for your rights by just walking in the street with a lot of other people, that is scary. And I understand why people are feeling scared, and I understand why some people might choose not to go. That's fine, that you do what you want to do. But if you're not going because you're scared, just even if you don't go, think about what that means and think about where we are, because that's your right. You have the right to protest, peacefully protest, march in the street. Of course you do. From the beginning, again, the First Amendment. Of course you do. So, okay.
Getting
I'm now,
a lot of good emojis floating up.
I see hearts, like party horns. Yeah.
All right, our next question comes from another longtime community member. Karen Haas asks, reading how red state governors are calling up National Guard before tomorrow's No Kings March. Historically, does such calling up of troops make the callers look weaker or what?
Well, it definitely makes them look scared. I mean, other marches, even recent marches, there have been a lot of police around doing nothing. And when asked, they said, well, there's nothing going on. Like you guys are just
Not breaking the
marching.
law. Yeah, First Amendment.
Nothing to do. So again, if people don't want this to happen, they will do everything they can to scare people away. They'll make ridiculous claims on TV. They'll talk about I don't know why there's a magic 8 ball floating through the air. The emojis totally distract me, guys, because I guess because I'm an old and I'm not used to it. But at any rate, you know, people who want us to be scared are going to be doing things to make us scared. And that's the point of what they're doing. And again, peacefully marching in the street, not responding to people trying to provoke trouble, not doing anything except peacefully marching with a lot of other people. And I will say too, because I've seen people say this online, I most of the people who I'm closest with are not marching types. They're not they're not out there with me, right? Which is fine. And I love these people, and I don't. If you don't want to do it, you don't do it. But what that means is that typically when I go out into the world just to march, I do it by myself. Now, I think it's probably smart not to be all by yourself when you do this. But what I do, and maybe this says more about me, I don't know, is I just begin talking to other people who are clearly on their way to do what I'm willing to do. And then I'm with them. Like last time, there was a group of Unitarians who I saw on the subway and they were holding signs. So when we got off the subway, I said, I don't quite know where I'm going, but I think you guys probably know where you're going. So I'm going to come with you. And I chatted with them and they were very nice and I marched with them. So, you know, you know already if you're there are all kinds of other people who are there for the same reason as you. So, chatting with people, they were really nice people. I had really interesting conversations. I actually did, and I think I mentioned this when I mentioned this before in the episode. I actually did talk about what Thomas Jefferson thought about Unitarians. He liked them. But so there I am. I'm like, you guys are great. I'm marching with you. Did you happen to know that Thomas Jefferson thought all Americans would become Unitarians? I
That's
can't help,
awesome.
I
Oh
can't
my
help
gosh.
myself. I did really do that. And then I stopped because I think they were looking at me like I was crazy. But at any rate, yes. So that's a long answer
That was
to
a good question, Karen.
yes.
All right. Susan asks, have there been many protests that did not change anything? The Women's March, war in Gaza, war in Ukraine, gun control laws. What makes a protest successful? She wanted to know.
Well, how can you know that they didn't change anything? I mean, the protest is setting a stage. The protest is the beginning. If you want instant action, there was a march in the street, and then the next day, probably not. But, you know, does a massive march make a movement bigger? Does it make it more public? Does it show people that there's an issue where they weren't aware that there was an issue before? Yeah. So I don't know how you measure that. And I don't, we get all caught up in crowd size. So of course we're going to see tomorrow there were only 3 million. No, there were 20 million, this crowd size. And if the crowd size is bigger or smaller, that somehow matters. There better be millions, however many millions. But beyond that, what matters is that millions of Americans are out there doing it. And so, can if I sat and thought hard, maybe I could think of a moment where there was a march. Maybe someone will come up and chat with something, a moment when there was like a march or something like that, and then instant change. But I don't expect, and we shouldn't expect, I don't know what's going on in chat. Um, we shouldn't expect instant change because that's not what this is about. This is about setting the stage for change and showing that there's the spirit for it and showing that there are the people behind it. That's what it's about.
Right. Good questions this morning. All right, Daniel, who did not run to the other day, but he
Apparently not.
question.
Someone did say you're Joanne Freeman, and it made me
Right.
happy. It's just
All
stupid.
right. So Daniel asked, he says, it seems like a major issue is corporate media sane washing all of this nonsense and Trump's decline. How do we get them back on path? What are good independent sources? He says he listens to Midas Touch, but he can't follow it all day long.
No, I know, and it is true. You can't rely now on the things we used to, or certainly that I used to rely on for balanced news, because in one way or another, even if it's just in the nature of headlines, or stories that people are covering or choosing not to cover. There are smaller, more independent places to go to look for news. I see people listing some, that The Guardian is one, ProPublica is doing great stuff. There are any number of things, and of course, Heather, ways to get news. I have not kept up on what's happening on MSNBC now that they're no longer part of NBC. So I don't know what is happening there. But you are very right that you need to go beyond the Washington Post, the New York Times, the place at CBS, ABC, CNN. You need to go beyond where you might have gone before, because, and again, think about where we are. We cannot rely on those places to give us full coverage, because in one way or another, we're constantly, things are happening that are constantly making us question, really? That's your take on this? Or really, you didn't see fit to cover this? We are at a point where, and it's not that the press is all bad all the time, but there have been enough moments when parts of the press have seemingly cowed, given in, silenced themselves, compromised what they want to say, that we have to think hard. We have to be really smart news consumers. So that's a great question, because we do have to be really smart news consumers. Doesn't mean you can't look at those places. I actually am often very curious. I go to the New York Times because I want to see how they're covering a certain thing. and what that suggests. Like, am I going to read something and go, oh, interesting, they actually admitted this? Or am I going to read it and go, oh, interesting, they're denying this entirely? I don't know. I'd like to know. I'd like to inform myself. But I would say, and people are coming up with Robin Snyder, like Heather, but snarkier. People are coming, making a list of all kinds of places where they regularly go. So yeah, Lawrence O'Donnell has been really blunt and bold from a very early point. There are all kinds of places where you can go, but you're right. You cannot just rely on where you went before because those many of those sources are not consistently reliable. And yes, Deb says New York Times is a strange mixture of sane washing and excellent reporting. It's a weird mix, which is why I look at it and every once in a while I'm like, oh, that's a good story. And then I'm like, oh, but right next to it is this story where they're denying some really obvious thing or using some kind of weird headline that suggests everyone's happy or two things are equivalent when they're not. But at any rate, and there, Annie is saying too, Substack has a lot of, there are many people on Substack. Again, I realize it's hard to sift through everything and find everything. I realize it's hard. But you might like set an hour to do the sifting and come up with a couple things that you think are good, and then those just become the places where you go. Because yeah, we do have to be smart and motivated news consumers, and we can't. I can already tell you that whatever happens tomorrow, and however many people are there, we will not get the kind of coverage that we would like to see of the millions of people who are out marching, because we saw that the last march, right? Where it was like, wait, why the women's march? Remember the women's march? And there were so many millions of people, and the press was just like, yeah, women were marching. And that's important, an important point, because if the press isn't highlighting how many people on a national level, you're going to know locally that there are people doing something, right? And that matters too, because as I've said any number of times before, movements are built from the bottom up. Local matters big time in this moment. And that's important to remember too. If you're in a town and 50 people in a small town show up to do something, that could be a really big deal in a small town, right? So think about the meaning of where things are happening and how they're happening and what that means. People are still coming up with, yeah, all kinds of places. So this chat will be useful I don't go to Slack, but this chat will have a lot of places where actually the Tennessee Holler is somewhere I also sometimes
Yeah,
look.
I like that one too.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. So anyway, yeah, so this chat, again, if you're not on Slack and you want to be on it, is it a channel? Is it a
Yeah,
Slack?
so it's they call it a Slack channel. So Slack is just another digital platform where you can create communities. We made one a long time ago when we started History Matters. All you have to do is put the word Slack in all caps so I can quickly find it, and your name and your email that you prefer. And then I try as hard as I can as soon as we log off each Friday to invite everyone. Now, some people don't accept the invitations and then they expire and then they say, you never added me to Slack. So whatever email you use to ask me to add you, please check that email in the next couple of days and actually accept the invite. Otherwise, I keep getting annoying things saying this person hasn't responded. This person hasn't responded. So if you don't want to be in the community, don't sign up, right? Like if you do, like please
Respond.
through and activate because and it's a very friendly community, you know. It's just like this, but throughout the week. Okay, our good buddy Troy from Kentucky says, Joanne, would you agree that what we are in the process of doing is filling the cup of change drop by drop until it overflows? That's like poetry.
Oh,
Troy,
I like that.
I know I'm gonna get verklempt.
I know. Verklempt. I haven't. I used to say that all the time.
I used to because we used to watch Seinfeld all the time.
Yeah, yes, verklempt. Yeah, I think that's a nice way of putting it, right? Maybe we're all like one coin but you put them all together and it really matters. That's a nice way of putting it. It is kind of a poetic way of putting it. So yes, I like that way of putting it.
I like that too. Okay, I don't think this has ever happened in the 200 and what is it? Oh, Claire left, not 287?
Yeah, 287. How did I remember it? Someone
Questions
raised their
before
hand.
10 o'clock. That never happens.
Oh, look at that.
We
Someone
we
raised
we
their hand a
answered all the
moment ago.
questions.
I know. Um, Someone raised their hand, I saw, and then it went away.
Oh, oh, Dr. Nancy raised her hand. Okay, Dr.
Okay.
Nancy,
Is
can
that for a question or
I
is that
don't know. Can you put it in the Q? Oh, wait, maybe somebody just put something in the Q&A. Oh, no. Nancy, do you want to put in the Q&A?
I'm trying to catch up on what people have been saying because the chat's been zipping along here. Um,
Unfortunately, Claire didn't make me the co.
this
See,
is who raised their hand before.
okay, RP. Okay, can you put it in the chat? I don't have the ability to turn other people on because Claire didn't make me the co-host before she left.
Well,
So
you were and weren't and were and
I
weren't and weren't.
know. So I need you to put it either in Q&A, not raise your hand, okay?
I will say, while you guys are pondering questions, I see comments about well, Daniel says, come up with a better chant than tell me what democracy looks like. This is what I actually like that one. Yes, it's an old chant. I actually like that one. But what I was going to say is, when you're looking at the press, the Washington Post, Marty just talked about the Washington Post, referring to Mike Johnson's quote, increasingly bold style. Like, come on. When you read a headline and you see something and you've seen what's happening and you've seen, for yourself the words being spoken by some of these people, and it's being declared increasingly bold, like whether that feels accurate or not. The wording, I feel like in this sense, very much like a history professor, the wording matters very much. The way the words that the press is choosing to describe things, particularly the big media outlets, we're thinking about how that's coloring the way in which you're thinking about whatever story that they're actually talking about.
Okay, so I think we've got a few more questions. So RP was trying to raise her hand. They said in the past, have there been protests like this all across the country, not just DC? Are
Oh
there
yeah,
other examples?
yeah, no, that's a
Student
good
gun
question.
march that the students after the shooting in Florida, Parkland, March for Our Lives. I remember that was a huge one in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, people go to Washington not for obvious reasons, go to the center. But yeah, there have been a lot of marches. Even the last No Kings march,
Yeah.
right? It
And the
was
Pink Hats
everywhere.
during the last Trump
The
administration.
Women's March, right? That was everywhere. So yeah, it's a good question because it's a reminder of an important point, which is you don't have to be in a crowd of millions to have an impact,
Yeah.
right? You don't. And in a way, there's more of an impact in a smaller place when there are, numbers of people coming together in a way that really stands out. So again, we get caught up in like big numbers are the only thing that matter, and that's not the case. What matters is all over the place in numbers that you can see locally or otherwise that people are standing up and showing that there are enough people to stand up
Yeah.
that were visible.
So RP is asking if there were any in earlier times, not recent
Oh,
years.
oh, oh, oh.
And Kay kind of asked the same similar question, not just DC. So
Right, not just DC. Well, I mean, I can't point things out, but like if you're talking about um, civil rights activities or even the suffragist activities or things like that, those aren't happening in one place. There was a huge wide awake, again, political, not social, march in New York, but they were happening all over the place, and that was part of the point, was they were happening all over the place. So, as a matter of fact, in that case, young people knew that they could travel off on their own and find another group of young people to join in with because it was kind of like a club. So yes, there have been in the past movements that maybe start out with a big visible thing, but then move on to become localized. And again, if you look at how change has happened in the past, it's typically bottom up. It's typically local, moving to become something bigger. And again, those are all some of the reasons why this kind of protest, and as that question is asking, happening in a lot of places can make a difference in momentum.
and Susan wanted to know if you can think of any awesome protest lines from the past.
Oh
A lot
boy,
of people
I
were
do want to
citing
say,
Vietnam and Iraq War.
Deb says Vietnam War protests enter the chat. Yes, big time. Um, and actually any number of women's rights protests. LG, yes. So there, thank you folks for beaming in lots. But I'm sorry, the question was,
Any awesome protest march
oh
lines for the
gosh,
past that they could, maybe convert or use?
actually, why don't you people, why don't
Yeah.
you folks beam them in? Because this is what democracy looks like, I think I have a sign that says that, this is what democracy looks like. Um,
Kathy brought up the G20 protests, where we're international. And that's the thing, like there's no King's marches going on in London.
right.
They were,
Except they're
Francesca said they're calling them no tyrants.
I was going to say, they
Yeah.
can't call them no kings, no tyrants. I approve. Um, what, uh, I'm trying to see, are people, well, that's another one, right? The hey, 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 ho, ho, fill in the blank. Um,
The Pointer Sisters idea, instead of we are family, saying we're democracy. That was a catchy little,
that could
that
be
one
if
catching
you can
on.
get people to sing.
I
The
love
people
Daniel's
united will
suggestion.
never be defeated. That's a big one.
Daniel
Um,
said we should redo the Lee Greenwood song because Trump seems so attached to that, proud to be an American. If they could rewrite the lyrics to fit the No Kings idea
yeah.
without
Um,
getting sued by Lee
I
Greenwood.
mean, the last march that I took part in was, show me what democracy looks like. I can't remember. They were long standing. So as that person asked, do we have to have the same chant? But it's because everyone knows them, right? But if you can think of something snazzy and say it loud enough, I can't remember the last time I marched, but that happened in which someone said something snazzy and they were standing next to someone that had a drum,
Oh, and it
and
just
then the crowd started saying that thing,
went
right?
viral.
Yeah, it was it. So anyway,
I'll say the laftivism idea that you brought up a few weeks ago made me think of the last really, really, really big one was when Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert took over the National Mall with the Rally to Restore Sanity.
right.
It was entertaining, but also it got a lot of people thinking and got a lot of people out there and pushing back. And I went with a big group of teachers, and even a few of our kids showed up, even though we didn't tell them to. They heard us talking about meeting on the steps of the American History Museum at the Smithsonian. That was sort of our meeting point. And then a bunch of them just showed up anyway on their own, which I thought was kind of cool.
I also want to point out who did Sue in Portland playing Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land" was inspiring.
Mhm.
Like if you have a way to be marching and playing a song like that that has
That's a
meaning,
great song too.
I would march and sing,
Yeah,
right?
right. All right, last question. Dale wanted to know if Hamilton had anything to say on this topic of protesting.
Oh, yeah, he wouldn't have been a big fan. So Hamilton um, understood that the government that was being created here was grounded on the people to a greater degree than the British government was, right? So that there was a more democratic component to what was going on here. The public was more central in a way to what was going on here. But he was very worried about the impact of democracy. I mean, his last one of his last sort of statements, above and beyond, here's why I'm fighting a duel, is something like he writes it to a friend and says that the main disease attacking us right now is democracy. He saw democracy as, the people in the streets, disorder, bad. He always, well, not always, often when people were out in the streets, his impulse was like, I think we have to call in some troops and quiet them down. So he's not somebody who would have been a big fan of protests. Why? Because he saw it as a way to question the authority of the national government. And given he wanted a strong national government, he was not a fan of that. Now, at the time, the national government was like 5 years old, so that was a whole different issue. But um, yeah, he would not have been a huge fan. And, a number of times in his life, he tries to stifle protests of various sorts. And again, sometimes uh, thinking of the military and doing so. So yeah, sorry, this is one way in which we cannot say Alexander Hamilton is a hero. He was very wary of democracy. Uh, Nancy, I will wait till the after party. Everyone should carry a pocket-sized copy of the Constitution. I have so many um, of those floating around here. That's true. Just hold up your Constitution. Um, oh, see now here, Troy is coming up with all kinds of things. Those are good.
Jimmy Kimmel's been, and even before he got taken off the air and put back on, but he's been killing it too. And also, we're hosting an office hours Tuesday night if any of y'all want to join, teachers, non-teachers, kids, parents. We always love having people show up. So,
Sure. We're actually a couple minutes past, so maybe we should.
Daniel, I didn't hear that. Circumcision causes autism. How did I miss that this week? Apparently, RFK Jr. said that.
I'm just tuned out on every.
I missed that one. I guess I was on a plane somewhere.
Um, okay, so maybe we should. Do you know how to stop the?
Well, I'm going to stop the recording because I
So let
can't.
me explain what's going to happen before you do that.
Okay.
Okay, so right now what we're going to do is we're heading into the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording so that we can be even freer and easier than we normally are. If you beamed in through NCHE, just stay right where you are and poof. Someone came up with the first poof and I forgot to notice who. You will be in the after party. If you are watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. Okay, so I want to thank NCHE and Jessica and John and Annie and Claire. I want to thank you as ever for being here week after week to raise these kinds of questions, to have these kinds of discussions. I want to say that tomorrow will be important uh, to ideally take part in, but also just to watch and witness in one way or another. Massive public protest matters. And I'm guessing a lot of you may be there tomorrow. And that is a good thing. It just is if there are a lot of people there. Um, Okay, I guess I don't think I'm forgetting anything else. Thank you for engaging in the process of democracy on a Friday morning. And we'll probably have a lot to talk about next Friday.
I have a feeling we will, but we always do. Well, okay, so I'm gonna stop the recording.